We are now officially live.
Okay, Soti everyone, and welcome to our weekly online Dhamma group with the online Sirimangalo community and with Venerable Dhammo, who is joining us from the meditation center in Sri Lanka. So first and foremost, if you are interested in doing a meditation course, either online as an introduction or intensively in the retreat center, then feel free to reach out to us, and everything is free of charge. Today we will continue with our study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, precisely the commentary by the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. And we do that as a reading group. So we have a reading group on Discord, and if you're interested in joining that, the prerequisite is to have done at least the at-home course that we offer. After 1 hour of study and perhaps discussion, there will be a Q&A, and you can already start posting your questions, and we will sort them according to a tier list with where we give priority to questions that have sincerity and are more practice related than theory. We will begin by taking together Refuge in the Triple Gem, and we will take the 5 precepts together. And taking the 5 precepts is something we always do before we begin with studying, because it's an important reminder for the basic morality that is giving us the foundation for the meditation practice, and really is very important, a really important part of Buddhist practice. And refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is also very important for us. It's an ancient tradition which we follow, and by doing that, you formally profess that you are a Buddhist and you take the Buddha as your refuge and his teachings, and the enlightened ones and the monks who practice the teachings and pass them on. So is there someone in the reading group who would like to lead the recitation today?
May I, please?
Yes, thank you, Kiki.
Thank you. Aham bande tisaranena saha pancha silani yajami. Dutiyampi aham bande tisaranena saha pancha silani yajami. Tatiyampi aham bande tisaranena saha pancha silani yajami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Dhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhan saranam gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhamman saranam gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghan saranam gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Bodhan Saranan Gacchami.
Tutiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhamman Saranan Gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sanghan Saranan Gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddhang Saranang Gacchami.
Tatiyampi Bodhan Saranan Gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhammang Saranang Gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhamman Saranan Gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sanghang Saranang Gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sanghan Saranan Gacchami.
Saranagamanang Nititang.
Hamapante.
Anatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Panatipada Veramani Sikkhapadan Samadhiyami.
Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Adina Dana Veramani Sikkhapadan Samadhiyami.
Kamesu Miccācara Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Kamesu Miccācara Veramani Sikkhapadan Samadhiyami.
Musāvāda Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Musāvāda Veramani Sikkhapadan Samadhiyami.
Surameraya Majjapamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Sura Meraya Majja Pamadatana Veramani Sikkhapadan Samadhiyami.
Imani Pancha Sikkhapadani Silena Sugating Yanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Nibuting Yanti Tasma Silang Visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Delaware, are you still there, friend?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was muted. So I will repeat. If you are in the reading group, please send a request to speak on stage. We usually read 2 paragraphs and take our time while reading and leave a pause between each paragraph. So there's time for discussions or questions or guidance by the Venerable. And we are right now finishing the section of how much learning is necessary. So this is page 161 of the PDF. No, of the book, and PDF 171. The last reader was Mila. So the next one would be, I think, Shibitsu. Are you able to start?
Yes.
Okay.
The basic path, Mula Magga, is comprises the right view of ownership of one's Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, morality, sila, and access concentration, upachara samadhi, or absorption, appanya samadhi, which I have already dealt with fully before. As to the first factor, the majority of Burmese Buddhists have already established faith in this right view since childhood. With regard to the path of morality, if the lay meditator is not established in it yet, he or she can accomplish it by observing the precepts just before taking up the practice of meditation. The bhikkhu meditator should purify his morality by confession if he entertains any doubts about the purity of his morality. As for accomplishment in concentration, the meditator should take up a tranquility exercise such as mindfulness of respiration, anapanasati, and practice it until attaining absorption or access concentration. If time or opportunity does not permit, the meditator can begin contemplating on the four primary elements by means of which momentary concentration for insight, vipassana khanika samadhi, which is akin to access concentration, may be attained. This concentration dispels the hindrances so that purification of mind may be achieved. This is a brief description of how the basic path is established.
So, okay, first of all, where are we? We are still in the fourth noble truth. Remember, this is the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first discourse of the Buddha, the turning of the wheel, setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma. The wheel of Dhamma is basically the four noble truths. So it's the core of the sutta and the core of the Buddha Sasana. Fourth noble truth is the truth of the path that leads to the cessation of suffering, which is the Eightfold Noble Path, and I think we're still on the first factor. I'm not sure if he goes through all. We'll have to see, but we're on. We've been talking about right view and how one only needs to have intellectual knowledge of the first two noble truths, or how one only needs to contemplate the first two noble truths during practice. So here he's shifting a little bit to talk about what constitutes practice. And when he says basic path, it's really everything up until wisdom. So he's following the commentaries, especially the Visuddhimagga in this paragraph, where he says that you can either practice samatha meditation first, for example, anapanasati, or you can contemplate the four primary elements from the very get-go. You don't have to practice some auxiliary practice first, because the sorts of meditations that he's referring to, even anapanasati, if practiced just focusing, say, on the in-breaths or the out-breaths, are all samatha meditation, meaning the object is a concept. So the breath going in and going out is a concept. Breath doesn't actually go in. That's not actually what you experience. So when you imagine breath going in and out, it becomes conceptual, and that's why it's very calming. Because concepts are calming. Concepts can be, don't have to be, sorry, but concepts can be incredibly calming since they are not real. They aren't subject to impermanence. They aren't subject to the rules of reality, the laws of reality, the characteristics of all arisen phenomena. So the breath going in and the breath going out can be constant. It's always the same. It's always a very simple, clear concept of breath going in. If you don't pay attention to the reality of it being unpredictable, impermanent, and so on, you just start to pay less attention even to the actual reality of the breath going in and going out, and so you become very calm as a result. You couldn't do that with reality. If you were watching the actual reality of the breath, which is what we do when we watch the stomach, you could never get that calm, because those realities are chaotic. They're changing. Of course, the body is not. The body doesn't care whether you're practicing meditation, and so it calms down. The body will do its thing of being unpredictable. So every in-breath and every out-breath is different, and it becomes stressful and challenges you in the way that vipassana meditation challenges you. But anapanasati as a samatha practice doesn't do that, because you're focused just on the concept of the breath going in and the breath going out. So you can do that first. And if you do that, your mind becomes very tranquil, and then you switch to focus later on the actual realities of, say, the breath, and you can develop insight that way. To practice insight first, you simply, as is explained in the Visuddhimagga, you instead simply skip the samatha part and focus on reality from the get-go, focusing on the four elements, whereby you begin to also see the mind clearly. So it also says, it basically implicitly asks the question, why don't you focus on the mind as well? It's enough to focus on the body, because as the body becomes clear, the mind becomes clear as well. But this is exactly the way it's explained in the Visuddhimagga. When he talks about momentary concentration as being akin to access concentration, this statement will probably get anyone who's more knowledgeable, I don't know if there's anyone here, but someone who is more knowledgeable might get a little bit confused or concerned. People outside of our tradition might take exception with this statement. And the point is that he's trying to address the technicality that one needs to have concentration of either upachara or apana in order to give rise to wisdom. And so the problem is that this vipassana practice doesn't give rise to the same category of concentration. It's not called the same thing. It's not called upachara. So, okay, to step back a little bit. Apana is attainment. So this simply means when one enters into jhana. So by jhana, we mean a state where the mind is fixed and focused, and whatever else it might be simply has no hindrances. The hindrances don't arise. Liking, disliking, drowsiness, distraction, doubt, they just don't arise. The mind is pure, the mind is clear, the mind is strong, and the mind is focused. And in jhana, in apana, the mind takes a single object to the exclusion of everything else. So when you enter into that state, you generally don't see or hear or smell or taste or feel or think about anything else except this single object that you're focused on. That's the idea of jhana. That's the idea of apana, where you've attained, you've entered into some, what people would often describe as a special state. Upachara samadhi is the state before that. So it's called upachara. Upachara means neighborhood or approach. Upachara, coming close, coming towards. So before you get into that state where you're fixed on a single object like the breath or a color, for example, is a very common one, focusing on the color white. Before you get to that, you get to a state where the the hindrances are suppressed, but you're not yet focused on a single object. So your mind is still approaching that state. There are some types of meditation that only give rise to upachara samadhi. They don't actually lead to appana samadhi. I think I'm just confusing it. I think this is going to be too much for people, but it's complicated because there are those ones that are just upachara, but they are still samatha. And the reason why they are, I don't have a definite reason as to why some only lead to upachara. Some only lead to upachara because they take ultimate reality as an object. But they are still samatha meditation. So for example, buddhanusati, mindfulness of the Buddha. The problem with buddhanusati, or not the problem, but the limitation of it, is that buddhanusati isn't actually focused on the Buddha as a person. It's still focused on the qualities that make up the Buddha. And the challenge is, or the limitation is, that those qualities are real. And because those qualities are real and you have to consider them and contemplate them, I guess, as they're present in you, they also arise and cease. And so they can't be an object of this stable sort of appana samadhi or jhana or intense trance state. But they're still samatha meditation. Vipassana meditation, I guess the point is that it isn't ever given this moniker of upachara samadhi. But I guess to simplify it, we can say that it is the same sort of concentration that you get from focusing on, say, the qualities of the Buddha. Because you're switching from one quality to the next, mindfulness of the Buddha can never lead to, according to the Visuddhimagga, can never lead to trance. Because you're jumping from one quality, or because the qualities are arising and ceasing, or however it is. With Vipassana meditation, the same is true. Focusing on ultimate reality, focusing on moments of experience, obviously you're never going to get to a point where you're fixed and focused on a single object. But it still has the power to dispel the hindrances from the mind. Not permanently. None of this meditation removes them permanently. So it's described as suppressing, but it means it stops them. They don't arise. And it stops them in the same way as samatha meditation does. But it's not called upachara, and I guess my point is he's just being very technical. And he has to be very technical because he's dealing with people who have deep knowledge of the texts, and they're going to take issue with the sorts of things. They're going to have questions about these sorts of things, and they have views about these sorts of things. So he has to explain again and again this sort of thing. Basically, what he's saying here is that this is concentration. And concentration doesn't have to be fixed and focused on a single object. In fact, if concentration is focused on a single object over time, then it can't possibly lead to vipassana because the object is not real. Real objects don't last like that. If you want to see clearly, if you want to gain this understanding that nothing is worth clinging to, which is what if you remember last week, that was the base that the Buddha said that you have to learn before you start practicing. You want to get to an understanding, a realization of that for yourself. You have to focus on reality, and because reality is arising and ceasing, it can never lead to this sort of concentration. So all he's doing here is saying that don't be discouraged, or don't misunderstand that you have to get some kind of a deep, fixed and focused concentration. You can do that first, but you're still going to have to eventually shift to focus on things that are arising and ceasing, which will not allow you to have that same sort of deep and lasting concentration on a single object.
Development of preliminary path. After developing the basic path as described above, the meditator starts observing the reality of the truth of suffering. otherwise called the aggregates of attachment, by noting continuously the phenomena of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking at the moment each phenomenon occurs. A full account of the aggregates, and how failing to note them and see them as they really are, leads to clinging to them as permanent, pleasant, and self, and how seeing their true nature through heedfulness, attachment to them is extinguished, has already been given in parts 3 and 4 of this series of discourses.
When concentration becomes fully established, one becomes aware with every noting of the arising and vanishing of mind and matter, and their three characteristics. Such awareness is developed may be explained thus. While noting each action of rising, falling, sitting, touching, bending, stretching, lifting, stepping forward, moving, resting, the meditator begins to recognize the knowing mind as distinct from the material body. This discernment is analytical knowledge of body and mind, the initial basis for the development of insight knowledge. The Blessed One described how this knowledge may be developed by giving the example of a lapis lazuli in the Sammanyanaphala Sutta and Mahasukludya Sutta.
He's still following the Visuddhimagga. This is the beginning of the Panya, the wisdom section. Again, this is the part where you're probably better served not studying these things. He's describing something that happens to a meditator, for the meditator, when they undertake actual direct practice. And I mentioned before that we have a real issue where there's an obsession, and it's very difficult to curb this curiosity for some people, and they insist on doing intellectual investigation. So we mentioned something that seems, well, profound and valuable, well, priceless, in fact. And so, how could you not want to find it by searching it out? Because we're not able to immediately gratify this desire through actual practice, because of course practice takes work, takes time, and it takes dedication, both. The less dedication, the more time; the more dedication, the less time. But it takes both time and dedication, and because that's not acceptable, we have an issue where people will seek out intellectual knowledge of these stages of knowledge. I would caution you that the more intellectual knowledge you find about these sorts of stages, I mean, it's not secret. They're not meant to be something hidden away, kept away from people, but the problem is the intellectual knowledge is just a pale comparison It's nothing like actual experience. It can lead to complacency. It very much does lead to complacency. Anyone who's learned a lot about the stages of knowledge, or any of the higher teachings of the Buddha, the more they know, the less they need to the less they feel the need to practice, because they feel like they already know everything. They know nothing, but they feel like they know everything because they have the intellectual knowledge. So it does lead quite often to complacency. But more dangerously, because more concerned with those people who actually aren't complacent and those who are actually seeking out cultivation of the practice, is that when they do start to practice, they have doubts and confusions and expectations based on what they've read. Is this what I read? When am I going to get to this part, this thing that I read about? How do I get to this thing that I read about? Because their minds are not developed enough. Their minds are not strong enough to see the things for themselves. So they find themselves undertaking wrong practice of reflecting and intellectualizing and doubting and worrying and so on. So don't misunderstand that we're trying to keep knowledge from people. But I really would recommend not being concerned. You don't benefit from learning about these things. And what that should impress upon everyone is that there is knowledge. There is this incredible knowledge that can only be found through actual application of practice. And
one thing I find it
that really is the most important benefit of meditation practice, is that it gives access to knowledge that is not accessible by ordinary means. ChatGPT isn't going to give you that knowledge. The internet isn't going to give you that knowledge. Books aren't going to give you that knowledge. And even your own mind contemplating and rationalizing is never going to give you that knowledge. It's hard to explain because if you've never, I mean, for those who have meditated, they're of course saying, yes, of course it's like this. But if you've never practiced meditation, it's so foreign, this idea that there's some other way of gaining knowledge. But it needs to be understood that what we're talking about is knowledge from seeing for yourself, knowledge from observing, not thinking, just observing and learning. And it's not easy. It's not instant. It's a problem is it doesn't give instant gratification, which is what we're becoming very much addicted to. It's something that requires patience and, again, time and dedication.
One thing I find it interesting that in mundane things in everyday life, there is something similar where you can read about many things in life, but you really have to experience much of it on your own to really understand it. Let's say cooking, for example, or I don't know, having your own place to live and taking care of it is not really something you can read about and know it, even though you think you know it, but in reality it's much more different. So there are probably better examples. But how can there be so much doubt with accepting this idea for Buddhism, even though it's, of course, much more profound? But as I understand it, it's the same principle.
Well, and a good example, I mean, those are good examples. A good one in general is the experience that comes from age. But I think that too is poorly appreciated. You know, there used to be this sense of respect for elders. Used to be, I don't know, maybe we're told about how respecting your elders used to be a thing. And in some societies, it's lasted longer, and there's this tradition of respecting your elders, and that's, of course, eroded with so many things. where elders are often ridiculed. Old people are ridiculed for their old-fashioned views and so on. But old people don't just have old-fashioned views, they have a lot of experience. And a good reason to respect your elders is that experience that comes over time that young people can't really understand. As you get older, you start to appreciate, oh yes, experience does come over time. But I think the real problem is just greed, just a desire to be gratified. Is applied to Buddhism, applied to meditation practice. People will do a huge amount of intellectual study out of greed. Greed for knowledge, greed for success, greed for answers. And the greed makes you try to bypass the work. You don't want to do the work to get the results. You just want the result. But that's what's being talked about here when he says the discernment is analytical knowledge of body and mind. Analytical knowledge of body and mind is the first of a sequence of stages of knowledge that are to be understood or to be experienced for oneself. I suppose a counter argument some people might come up with is, what if you have practiced meditation and you want to know whether you've reached stages of knowledge? And that's valid. So I think the best answer is that you should do best to practice under a teacher who has a program set up to get you to guide you through the stages of knowledge. And then once you've done that, then of course study becomes acceptable. Study becomes a good way to verify your results. But if you're just practicing on your own, there's still too much concern that you're probably not getting very far and you're probably just going to fall into intellectualization. But if you really are alone, if you really don't have access to a teacher or access to meditation practice under a teacher, then like everything, you really have to do all the study that you can and just hope for the best. It's just a much slower process that's fraught with all these difficulties of being alone, having to do all the study yourself, gain all the knowledge that a teacher would normally have, and then try to wade through it and fight against your doubts and your confusions and all of these problems that I've talked about. If you have a teacher, you don't have to do any of that. You shouldn't prepare by doing all the intellectual study first, because again, it just conflicts with what you actually experience. No, it doesn't conflict, sorry. It mixes with what you actually experience and makes it harder than it actually has to be.
Bhante, may I please, this is not necessarily a question, but I would like to link it back to earlier paragraphs when Mahasi Sayadaw was saying that the first and second noble truths are the one that we use, in the practice. So in my experience, coming from, where I come from, I thought I understood what suffering means. But actually, until I practiced the truth, the seeing the reality, my understanding of suffering was actually nothing but coming through all the poverty and all the hardships, or So
Right.
I thought that might be a little bit related to what we are discussing now with Dolores examples as well. So, thank you.
Oh, for sure. A difficulty with getting people to actually be interested in meditation is getting them to actually realize the depth of the wisdom that's gained from meditation. That this isn't the kind of knowledge you can actually gain from experience. It's similar. It's as I said, the old people, the experience that comes with age. It's a similar idea. But getting old doesn't give you this kind of knowledge. People who say they understand suffering, they only understand dukkha vedana and maybe a little bit of dukkha sabhava. Dukkha sabhava meaning they understand that suffering is a part of life and it's something you can't avoid, something that you can't just fix by running away from. That some amount of suffering you have to bear and endure. But they won't ever be able to understand dukkha lakkhana and dukkha satcha. Dukkha lakkhana is the level of experience where you start to realize that it's not actually things that are suffering. It's that we suffer because we cling to them. We suffer because we're attached to them, we identify with them. We're dependent on certain things being a certain way. And dukkha satcha is when you realize that about everything. So a person can go through life and figure that they've done well by understanding suffering and getting to the point where they are able to be patient with suffering. And that's noble in a certain way, to be able to bear with suffering, to not be addicted to pleasure, and to not be upset every time pain and suffering comes your way. There's something good about that. But the greatness of mindfulness, the greatness of the Buddhasasana is that it brings a level of actual peace and happiness and freedom, independence. That means you don't have to bear with anything. You're able to experience things free from stress, free from worry, free from anger, free from aversion, free from attachment, free from delusion. It's just so much deeper. That it really is something you have to experience for yourself. It's hard to explain. It's hard to encourage people. That's why the Buddha decided, after he became enlightened, he initially decided not to teach. Thought, well, how could people understand this? Nobody is even interested. Nobody understands. They don't even understand the level at which we're talking. You can't. It's like trying to talk to a fish about dry land.
Bante, one small question with regard to this word analytical knowledge just got me thinking about whether the word is analytical in the sense that obviously you're not it's not implying that you're thinking about this knowledge. So just that word.
Yeah, it's an implied. Analytical isn't a direct translation. A better translation would be, he's just using a stock translation of Namarupa Paricheda. Paricheda is categorizing or separating. It means, in this case, the ability to see the difference in two ways. So you can see the difference between one moment of body from the next moment of body and one moment of mind from the next moment of body. It's separating body into body moments and mind into mind moments. So, which is of course essential because it breaks free from the idea that there is a continuous self, that there is a continuous body from moment to moment. Being able to see moments of body separated one from the other and moments of mind separated one from another. And the second way is to be able to separate body from mind so that you don't have the idea of a a unified soul, unified self, I, be able to separate reality into two parts, the physical and the mental. So when the foot moves, there's the body is the physical sensation, and the mind, which is aware of it. So it doesn't mean analytical. Analytical is, not a very good translation. It's the knowledge that separates body and mind, basically. That's probably the most literal and accurate translation.
Thank you, Bhante.
So he's using the word analytical to describe that, analyzing or separating, but it's not really analytical. But it's not just knowledge of body and mind. It's knowledge that separates or dissects, paricheda, separates into components, into parts. And they're trying to convey that with the word analytical, but it's not great.
Simile of a gem strung on a thread. If a pure lapis lazuli velouria gem strung on a brown, yellow, red, white, or light yellow thread is taken in the palm of the hand for observation, a man with good eyesight is able to distinguish the gem from the thread. He can see clearly the colored thread in the body of the gem. Likewise, the meditator is able to differentiate the knowing mind from the object to be known. He knows also the knowing mind rushing out towards the object to be known. In this simile, the material object is like the precious gem. The knowing mind is like the thread. Like the thread embedded in the gem, the knowing mind plunges towards the object. Thus, the differentiation between mind and matter is illustrated by this simile. It should be carefully observed that in the simile there is no mention of knowing as to how many types of matter, how many types of mind and mental concomitants are involved. It mentions only distinguishing the knowing mind from the material objects known.
It's maybe worth mentioning for the simile that this gem is blue, a deep blue color. Again, in the Visuddhimagga, we find the following description of how mind becomes evident to the observing meditator. For the meditator, having discerned by such and such a method the nature of materiality, then in proportion as materiality becomes quite distinct, disentangled and clear to him, so the mind that has materiality as its object becomes plain and evident too. Further, we find in the Visuddhimagga, it is when supported by mind that matter arises. It is when supported by matter that mind arises. When mind has the desire to eat, drink, speak, and adopt a posture, these passages make it plain that mere reflection on different categories of mind and matter will not result in analytical knowledge of body and mind, nama, rupa, paricheda, jnana. Genuine insight is developed only when the knowing mind and the material object to be known can be separately recognized while observing the phenomenon of arising and vanishing of mind and matter as it occurs.
Yeah, as this is what I mentioned earlier, where you focus on the four elements, meaning you focus on the body, the earth, the air, the water, the fire, the sensations in the body. You don't have to focus on the mind because the mind becomes clear. This statement is the first statement in this paragraph is one that's often quoted in our tradition. For the purpose of explaining why we practice focusing on the stomach rising and falling, it seems silly to be focusing on the stomach rising and falling as though there were some benefit to be found there. And this is, I think, a source of a lot of disdain or confusion or misunderstanding about this technique, because it doesn't seem to be of any spiritual benefit to focus on your stomach rising and falling. And there's nothing special about the stomach for sure, but there is something special about rupa, about the physical form, and the rising and falling of the stomach is a part of that. It's just an arbitrary part of that, but it's a part of that that is consistent. And the stomach rises and falls constantly. So it's one of the few things that you have access to that's coarse enough to readily grasp and consistent enough to readily grasp regularly. And when you do focus on rupa, nama becomes clear as well. And nama is what we're really interested in. Not only learning about it, but changing it. And when you focus on rupa, the focusing is the mind focusing. And so the mental qualities improve by this simple exercise of focusing on the stomach. It's so valuable, Once you get into it and are dedicated to it, you come to appreciate how this simple practice of focusing your attention on the stomach rising and falling can take you all the way to enlightenment. Anyone who says watching the stomach rising and falling, this isn't the teachings of the Buddha, has no meaningful understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, if they say that. And I've heard people who should know better say that sort of thing. No, the Buddha didn't teach watching. I had a monk who was, I guess, a very accomplished meditator and a monk of many years. Last time I was in Sri Lanka, he came to visit us in our monastery, and he didn't even speak English, but through a translator, he said, what do you practice? I said, I watch the stomach rising and falling, and immediately he said, oh, that's not the Buddha. You have to be careful. The translator said, you have to be careful because that's not the teaching of the Buddha. And I just said to him, I said, do you understand Vayodhatu? I use this word because he understood Pali, I guess. I mean, of course, he understood the word Vayodhatu. And immediately said, oh, well, if it's Vayodhatu, then it's the teachings of the Buddha. Vayodhatu means the air element, the pressure element. And it's part of rupa. And focusing on rupa is incredible, what it does to your mind. It strengthens the mind, and not just in terms of of concentration, but also in terms of wisdom. It strengthens the mind in terms of concentration because of the challenge, the training that goes into catching an experience as it arises and as it ceases. There's a strength of mind. There's confidence, there's effort, there's mindfulness, there's concentration. Most importantly, there's also wisdom. Wisdom is seeing that it's impermanent, not just that it arises and ceases, but that it's unpredictable. Sometimes it arises like this, sometimes it arises like that, and it arises of its own accord. Not when you want it to, it happens when it happens. So it's impermanent, it's non-self, and as a result of that, it's dukkha, which means it causes suffering if you try to control it, try to hold on to it, try to make it stable, try to make it yours. And that's the wisdom. Just watching the stomach rise and fall will do this for you. It's why it's so uncomfortable, and why it can be a reason for people to stop practicing or go to find some other practice, because we don't want to see the three characteristics. We've made a habit of finding ways to avoid seeing the three characteristics. What we're asking meditators to do here is pretty much the opposite of what they've learned to do throughout samsara. Second quote here deals with another stage of knowledge further on with it. So Namarupa Paricheda Jnana may not sound like much, but it is crucial. It's in some ways the most important, because it's like the door. If you miss the door, you'll never get in the room. No matter where you go, no matter how much you push yourself against the wall, again, if you have a house or a building or let's say a castle, if you can't find the gate, you'll never get in the castle. You can bang your head against the wall. You can run at the wall. If you don't find the door, if you don't find the gate, you're not getting in. And so what this means is if a meditator or a would-be meditator approaches experience from a wrong point of view, thinking it's me who's meditating or it's me who's breathing, that my right foot moving and my left foot moving is actually me walking. It's not distinct moments of experience and so on. If they still have those kind of views, they'll never reach the higher stages of knowledge. It's like a doorway because it's the foundation. It's like in Canada, we say, keep your stick on the ice. I think we say that for something else. I'm not actually, but in hockey, you have to keep your stick on the ice. If you hold your stick by the wrong end, you can't hit the puck. And if your stick is not on the ice, you can't hit the puck. You have to have a right grasp, is what I'm saying. You have to have a right grasp of reality before you can start to see it clearly. Namarupa Paricheda is essential, because the next one that he talks about here is talking about how Nama and Rupa work together, how they function, which again might not seem like much, but it's incredible. Because when you see how Nama and Rupa work together, you understand karma. You see how, let's say, greed leads to a physical response, leads to a physical result. How anger leads to a physical result. You understand that there's no getting away from it. You can't get angry and have no result. You can't get greedy and have no result. Karma has an effect. It has an immediate effect on your body in terms of stressing you out. I mean, bad karma anyway, or making you happy. If you do good karma, you help someone, if you're kind. Wow, that really strengthened both my mental and my physical. But it also inclines you to do things. So anger creates the physical in the sense that it makes you want to hurt others or hurt yourself or say things or so on. Greed as well. leads to the physical. It leads to you to physically speak or physically steal, or verbally manipulate. Even just the first 2 stages of knowledge is an incredible achievement. And there's many more stages. But none of these stages are accessible to intellectual learning, is the point.
Okay, I think we can stop here for today. So thank you, Bhante, for your explanations, which are very valuable. So great appreciation. And thank you everyone for reading, making the effort to read. And if you have now any questions or remarks about the text, the topics from today, then feel free to turn on your mic. Oh, Kiki, you want to say something?
Yes, Bande, please, if you don't mind me asking one question that is slightly related to earlier paragraphs where Mahasi Sayadaw was talking about the concentration. The first, it's not about anapana concentration. He talked a little bit about concentration. So my question is, during the meditation practice, there is one tiny moment of not having, not having, it feels like free because there is no thoughts or just noting, nothing, no thinking. Everything seems to be like just nothing, Bande. So is that called concentration, or what might that be? Sometimes I even forget to note that free or nothing. So I would appreciate your advice on that, Bande. I don't want to be on the wrong track. Thank you.
So we in our tradition we would call that passaddhi, which means tranquility. So you can say to yourself, quiet, quiet. That's the simple answer. But the point is that when we talk about concentration, in our tradition, we're talking about your focus on the experiences. So experiences arise and cease. And concentration is when your mind is focused on the experience, seeing it arise and cease. It's a sort of why we would encourage people not to put the emphasis on concentration. There's too much emphasis on concentration. You have to separate how the Buddha used words in various contexts. So in the broader context, he talked about the 3 trainings, sila, samadhi, panya. So sila we translate as ethics or morality. Samadhi we often translate as concentration, but that's misleading. Because it's not just concentration, it's samadhi is, I mean, if you look outside of Buddhism, the word samadhi, like in Hinduism, I think, or in pop Buddhism, like in Thailand, this word is used to, like in Thai they say nang samadhi, which means literally sit concentration or sit samadhi. But they don't mean that. They mean sit in meditation, nang samadhi, which means sit in meditation. And that's how the word samadhi should be used in that context, just meditation, or it's a word used to describe the general practice of focusing your attention. When we talk about concentration as a quality of mind, that's not what's being discussed there. sila, samadhi, panya. That's not what we're saying. But when we use the word concentration as a quality of mind, it's actually not the one you should be focused on. It's not the primary focus. The primary focus should be mindfulness. Because if you look at, say, the Bojjhangas, in the Bojjhangas there are 7, right? There's sati, viriya, dhammavichaya, iti, passaddhi, samadhi, upekkha. So there's 7. And 3 of them increase effort. That's viriya, dhammavichaya, and piti. These 3 are on the side of effort. And so they are the sorts of things that one has to improve upon if one is lazy or low effort. And 3 of them are on the side of samadhi, of concentration. That's passaddhi, which I mentioned, which is tranquility, samadhi, which is concentration, and upekkha, which is equanimity. And so these ones are important to be cultivated in people who are restless or people who are unfocused, unconcentrated. But then the Buddha says, sati, satincha kohang bhikkhave sabatikang vadami. Sati is always, I tell you monks, sati is always useful. So if you read in the Satipatthana Sutta, under the section on Cittanupassana, or whatever, Cittanupassana, I think, which means seeing the mind. The Buddha says, if the mind is focused, one knows that the mind is focused. If the mind is unfocused, one knows the mind is unfocused. In other words, if there's concentration, you know there's concentration. If there's not concentration, you know there's not concentration. In other words, you take concentration, and the Bojjhangas, for that matter, as an object of mindfulness, which is why it's proper practice to say to yourself, restless, restless, distracted, distracted, as well as saying quiet, quiet, focused, and calm. And of course, to note if you like it. I guess it's valuable to remember that even the jhanas, when you gain that appana samadhi, the state of trance where you're fixed and focused, even those have to eventually become the object of mindfulness, the object of satipatthana, the object of vipassana. In order to see clearly, you have to see that they also are impermanent suffering and non-self. So this state that you're talking about also has to be seen as impermanent suffering and non-self. Not suffering, but a cause for suffering if you cling to it. Dukkha.
Thank you, Pandey. I only practice Vipassana, and as I have learned from you through my at-home course. So thank you, Pandey. I cannot even hold on to it because very, very short moment. Sometimes I forget to know quiet. So
I cannot hold on to it. That's what's important. When you say that, appreciate that is a valuable, that's what's most valuable about that experience. That even the good things, you can't hold on to them. That's the nature of reality, because as you continue to practice, that will become something that resonates with you. Not just that, and not just that time, not just for now, because for many meditators, it's many other meditators in other traditions, it's a goal to get to the point where you can control those experiences, keep those experiences, which is wrong. I mean, or it's at least limited. It's wrong in the sense that it's not enough to lead to enlightenment. I mean, it's on the wrong path. It can be a good preliminary practice to chase those states and extend them. But ultimately, it's, as Ajahn Chah said, it's based on craving. I don't know if I'm not quite sure if I agree with him, but he did say jhana meditation is based on craving. Apparently, I have a translation where he said that. But what he's getting at as that you are not free from attachment just because you enter into a calm state. It's because your mind becomes very fixed. Those fixed states inevitably become an object of attachment until you free yourself from attachment by the real means, which is the practice of seeing clearly.
Just as a reminder for the questions, please try to ask practice-related questions, or not only practice-related, but practical questions or sincere questions, rather than theoretical ones. But if it's related to the study we have done, then the text we just read, then it might be more useful to ask theory questions. But also for Discord, just as Kiki has just done now, feel free to turn on your microphone if you want to say something.
No, I didn't see. Sorry, if I mistakenly clicked on it. No, thank you, Dilara.
Bhante, here's the first question for our Q&A. What is your view on mindful yoga, stretching, and doing various other movements mindfully?
Yeah, it's fine. The question, I guess, that I have is why you're doing yoga. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't do yoga. But the thing is, like, say we talk about mindful dancing. Usually you're dancing because you like dancing or because you enjoy or even mindfully listening to music, let's say. Why did you turn the music on in the first place? But the issue is with those sorts of things, not with yoga, but with those sorts of things, is that there's something that you're not noting. You're not noting the fact that you like it. And you're giving in to the liking to do that thing. When you're doing yoga, the question is, why are you doing yoga? And I ask the question because it can be, doesn't have to be, but it can be that you're doing yoga because of something that you like. Maybe you like the feeling of the yoga, or you feel some I don't know, mental or physical release as a result. And that's just a minor thing to keep in mind. I'm not saying no, don't do yoga, or yoga's bad or something like that, but be aware that the reasons why you do things can often lead you to not be very mindful of them. Not be very mindful when you do them. But anything physical you can be mindful of course. And I would say, generally speaking, for this audience and on the level that we're talking here, it's perfectly fine. if you get into doing the at-home course, for example, I would recommend trying not to spend too much time in things like yoga. And the biggest thing I can think of in regards to yoga is that it makes you feel physically better, which, I mean, that sounds like a good thing. And it's even touted as being healthy, right? Which it probably is. There's probably health benefits. But I would say that during a meditation course, it can be counterproductive to make your body feel better. It can also be not the best way to fix physical problems. I give you an example. In Thailand, there's something called Thai massage, and Thai massage apparently is very painful. I've never had a Thai massage, but it's apparently very painful. And as a result of that very painful experience, your body becomes relaxed. And I guess that's even healthy for the body. I mean, it sounds healthy. Blood flows better. Your body is in better shape as a result of these Thai massages. But because the tension is mental, the tension is mainly caused by lack of mindfulness, caused by the mental. You're not doing yourself a great service by relying on Thai massage. And so the same, I would say, goes for yoga. What you find in the practice of mindfulness is that it's also incredibly painful physically. If you're tense, for a person who's very tense, they will feel all the tension in their shoulders and in their bodies, in their heads. They'll feel headache and all these things. They'll have to experience these things, and it's often worse than ordinary life because they're not allowing themselves to find ways to relieve. They're instead facing. So it's worse, worse than normal because you're actually facing these things that you're normally finding ways to alleviate. And this is a problem where people think, of course I should alleviate it. If it's suffering, I should alleviate suffering. And that's actually not true. If it's, as we've learned from this sutta, hopefully, suffering is not something to be alleviated or avoided. It's something to be fully understood. I've said this several times and I keep repeating it because it bears repeating and it's so important. Suffering is to be fully understood, and to understand something, the only way is to face it. And when you do that, what you find is that, like a Thai massage, all of the tension in your body eventually goes away. It doesn't go away because you've done something physically. It goes away because you've done something mentally. And that is actually sustainable. And you'll never need to go through that again. With a Thai massage, ask someone. I had a student once who was a teacher of Thai massage, or someone who performed Thai massage, a masseuse. And she said, we discussed, and she agreed. She said, yeah, people who take Thai massage, they just have to come back later for another one because it's physical. All we're doing is alleviating the physical symptoms of the mental stress. If you change the mental stress, it's a better solution to the physical problem. And so the same goes with, I think there's something there in yoga, that people who do yoga are looking for that. And they do it regularly and they feel better generally. And that's a good thing. But they would be much better served by doing the mental work to not have those physical symptoms in the first place. It doesn't mean don't do yoga. I would say during a meditation course, as I said, try to limit it. And during an intensive course, you should absolutely give up everything, including yoga, tai chi, anything like that. In faith, because you're trying to do morning to night, from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep, you're trying to dedicate yourself to being mindful. And so there's no need to do, or it's a distraction to do anything like yoga or that sort of thing. Everything you should do should be very simple. So the worst, the most you should do is things like showering, eating, cleaning, walking, standing, sitting, and lying, and that's it. Keep it to the very simplest. Don't do anything complicated like yoga, which is complicated in that it complicates your mental inclinations, your mental approach.
Let's say, here's the next question. Is our walking meditation practice a samatha practice too? And would it be accurate to say that the highest state attainable would be upachara samadhi?
So again, we don't call it upachara samadhi because it's not going towards nibbana. Sorry, it's not going towards jhana. Or alternatively, because it's not samatha. And I'm not exactly sure which it would be, but it's one or the other, or it's both. So, because that's the problem Mahasi Sayadaw is encountering. He can't really call what we do upachara because that's not how the word upachara is used. It's used in conjunction with samatha meditation, in conjunction with the word apana, which means the attainment of actual jhana. But first of all, to answer your first question, walking meditation is focused on the experiences of the movement. So in the beginning, it's kind of vague, where we say stepping right, stepping left, but we give you later exercises that are more accurate. Like when you lift the foot, you say lifting. And then when you place the foot, placing. But lifting is an experience. There's an experience of tension and movement in the foot. And then placing. When you place down, there's an experience of placing. The lifting and placing aren't real in the sense of the actual experience, but the experience they describe is real. When we say lifting, it's just a conventional way to describe that experience of when the foot raises and when you place the foot. The words don't have to be precisely what's actually happening. They shouldn't be, because it's hard for those things to have meaning for us in an ordinary state. You don't have to break it down into the four elements, for example. The Buddha didn't either. When he said walk, he said when you walk, just say walking. But because the experience of lifting the foot is real, it's an actual experience, and placing the foot is real, an actual experience, it's not samatha, it's vipassana. And because it's vipassana, it can only lead to kanika samadhi, which means momentary concentration, which is the same as upachara samadhi, basically. The most important thing being that it stops the five hindrances from arising.
Bhante, here's the next question. What is better to note when pleasure and pain arises? Pleasure and pain, or feeling instead of the two?
I don't know if you've read our booklet on how to meditate, but it is pretty specific, I think. Pleasure should be noted as pleasure, pain should be noted as pain. I would only really use the word feeling to describe sensations in the body, like hardness, softness, stiffness. Those are feelings. If you feel pain, it should be pain. If you feel pleasure, it should be pleasure or happy. If you feel calm, it should be calm.
Here's the next question, Bante. When some feeling persists for more time, should I note it till it disappears or ignore it and go back to the abdomen? Ignoring it seems like not a good idea.
So again, if we're talking about just physical sensations, you don't have to note them until they go away. Just note them a few times and then go back to the stomach. But if we're talking about calm or pleasure or pain, you should try to note them until they go away. After a long time, if they don't go away, you can still go back to the stomach, but stay with them for some time. A little bit long anyway. See if they go away.
Bante, here's the next question that we have. I notice that when I limit time online, reduce entertainment, and give up smartphone use, my overall peace of mind increases, but I struggle to fill my time and get drowsy. Do you have any advice?
Yes, it's not easy. You have to fill your time ultimately by practicing meditation. When you give up entertainment, when you give up the world, you give up worldly life, you do walking and sitting from morning to night. And the best way is to have a formal meditation practice where you can set a timer and do repetitions, half walking, half sitting. This is how the Buddha explained it, all throughout the day, walking and sitting in alternation. But that's really the only answer ultimately. It doesn't benefit you to find other things to distract yourself with. The only exception, I guess, in times when you aren't able to do intensive meditation, because realistically, this isn't a great answer. For most people, this isn't possible. It isn't going to happen. They aren't going to put that much time and dedication in. So the next best thing, if you're unable to do intensive meditation practice, which, well, practically speaking, not everyone is able to, you can, or you should engage in charitable works, helping other people, being kind, being generous, teaching, studying. I mean, none of these things is really an answer, but what they do is they improve your quality of mind. And that can eventually lead you to be more inclined to practice meditation. If not in this life, then in future lives. I guess ultimately I would say, unless you're engaged in an intensive meditation course or ordained as a monastic or living in a meditation center, you don't have to be completely, you don't have to be obsessed anyway with giving up all entertainment. I mean, absolutely, give it up to the extent that you can. But being fixated on it can be problematic because of how it makes you disappointed in yourself when you go back to it. So better to be a little bit more mindful when you're engaging in entertainment and have a formal practice where you practice an hour or two a day. And slowly, gradually wean yourself off of it. The best way, of course, again, find a meditation center and just go live there. And take courses one after the other until you become enlightened. That's really the best way.
Bhante, here's the next question that we have. When speaking to a teacher, there might be situations when one is ashamed of bringing up something, out of worry of being judged or out of respect to somebody that it's more noble. What should one do?
You don't have to bring everything up. I mean, first of all, I guess you should appreciate it's not wrong to bring things up, and a good teacher is not going to judge you or look down on you for anything. I mean, I've heard, it's rare, but from time to time I hear things that I don't know if they're anything like what you're thinking of, but things that are embarrassing, let's say, from time to time. But so don't be concerned about that, and appreciate that your worry about being judged is a worry, is an attachment. Not good. It's not something you want to hold on to. It's something that you should try to learn to let go of. Because worrying about being judged is not a good reason not to do something. There are other good reasons not to do things that would make you be judged poorly, but the judging itself is not a good reason, not generally speaking anyway. But that being said, it's not really necessary for you to go into detail as a meditator. You only have to describe the experiences. So you saw something, or you see an image if you're imagining something, or you experience something physically, you experience something mentally. You only have to speak in general terms anyway. None of the details are important. In fact, we encourage meditators not to dwell on the details. The Buddha has explicitly said, don't pay attention to the details or the particulars. So it shouldn't really be a problem if you're embarrassed about something. It's not really something that has to come up. It doesn't benefit you by telling your teacher the details of such things. It's not going to make them give you better advice. You're best to focus on the mechanics of every experience that occurs.
Bante, here's the next question. How deeply do you recommend zooming in on a sensation, considering it consists of multiple components?
You shouldn't zoom in on anything that's not a part of the practice. When you experience something, you note it. Keep it simple. Sensations don't consist of multiple components. That's what happens when you zoom in, because I don't know what you're doing, but you're paying attention over time. Things don't have multiple components. It means something arises and ceases, and then something else arises and ceases. And you think, oh, this thing has multiple components. First I see this component, and then I see that component. But that's not what's really happening. What's real is one experience arose and ceased, the next experience arose and ceased, and those two experiences were different. They were distinct and they were different. Things don't have components. They're not things. They're experiences. And each experience is what it is. That's an important perspective that you have to, it's a shift of perspective that has to be accomplished. Rather than seeing as things that have components, experiences only have arising and ceasing. You don't have to zoom. You just have to note when you experience.
Bante, here's the next question. I'm back to being lazy, not meditating. How to get back on track? One reason I had to meditate was intellectual knowledge. Letting this go made me lose a bit of the momentum among being tired of the effort.
Well, the best way to get back on track, I don't know the best way, but an important part of getting back on track is realizing that there's no reassurance that you will get back on track. You might just be one of the people that's lost to samsara. That should scare you a little bit. There's no reassurance. We're not the protagonist in some movie that's going to get a happy ending. We're just flotsam and jetsam on the currents in the ocean of samsara. Up to us to decide whether we're going to be more than that. But what can you do? You can be mindful right now. You spent all that energy typing up that question, which was great. No disrespect or disparagement for taking the effort to ask a question. But that took some effort. So maybe it doesn't seem like a lot of effort, but it takes less effort to be mindful. You could have instead been mindful. Not that you should have, but you could have, for example. And right now, you can be mindful. The effort it will take for you to be mindful right now is less than the effort it took you to type up that question. Food for thought. So here and now, you can answer your question, get back on track right now. And when you start to apply that, being mindful here and now, then it becomes less about needing encouragement to go and do meditation than it is about living mindfully and living meditatively. Our meditation just becomes an extension of a mindful life.
Ante, here's the next question. What about involuntary movements during meditation, like a choreographed dance, and to a lesser extent, outside meditation? I first experienced this last year at retreat, and it began again about 2 weeks ago. I was told to focus on belly breath and not allow the body to move. I try to not do that now, but sometimes the body tends to leads. Can you please advise me?
I don't have a great answer for this. We did come across one woman who, in Thailand, who appeared to have strange involuntary movements of the body. Honestly, I don't think it's that much of a hindrance. I would just note the movement. I guess it does become a hindrance if you're trying to sit still, but it just means your meditation will be a little bit different. One thing you can try is telling it to stop. Just not out loud, but like in your mind, say stop. But I think there are cases where the body is just doing its own thing and you have no say in that. Very strange, you know? There are even apparently recorded cases in history, I don't know how accurate any of it is, but where like the body would be able to write something out and speak, but the person had no knowledge of what the hand was writing. Who is it? William James, I think, was this this scientist in early 20th century, early 1900s or so, who recorded some of these very strange, multiple personality things. So I don't know that strange things can happen. But ultimately, if it's just physical, you just note it. And if you can try to get it to stop just by saying stop, that doesn't work, then the best you can do is just note it. But you also have to catch, because some of these things can be caused by liking them, encouraging them subtly. So you have to catch any liking or any ideas you might have about them, like how it makes you special, or how you're confounding your teachers. You know, I'm just giving strange examples. For certain people, it might be this way, where they start to get ego about it, where I'm different, I'm a difficult case, and that becomes an ego, you know. Catch any of that, because that can perpetuate it. Not all, but in some cases, again, it's just completely involuntary and hard to find a good explanation. Probably karma has a lot to do with it, strange karma from past lives.
Ante, here's the next question. Can you explain the 8th, 9th, and 10th links of the dependent origination, please?
Gonna make me count them out. I don't have them numbered. I think that is Tanha, Upadana, and Bhava. Avijja Paccaya Sankhara, Sankhara Paccaya Vijnana, Vijnana Paccaya Namarupa, Namarupa Salayatana, Salayatana Paccaya Passo, Passo Paccaya Vedana, Vedana Paccaya Tanha. Tanha is 8. Upadana Bhava, 8, 9, 10. Well, tanha is when the mind reacts to the experience, basically. Yearns for it, or is excited by it. There's 3 kinds of tanha. There's kama tanha, or something sensuality, where you like something you see or hear or smell or taste or feel. Bhava tanha, where you like the idea of something. And vibhava tanha, where you like the idea of something not being. You like the absence of something. That leads to upadana. Upadana is really just tanha. I mean, from an Abhidhamma point of view, they're the same thing. But upadana means you can't avoid clinging. Not like you can like something and not need it. It's too late. Once you like something, you're already stuck. That's what that means. Upadana is just strong liking. That's not even the best way to describe it, because it's the inevitable consequence of liking is that you get stuck to it. You're stuck. And as a result of upadana, of being stuck, there is bhava. Bhava means in this life, bhava is just kamma. But in this life, it means, for example, you want a car and you're stuck. So as a result, you get stuck on getting the car, and then you take out a loan. The loan is the bhava, or the taking out the loan is the bhava, which means bhava means existence. Literally, the word bhava means being. It's like the English word being. You bring something into being as a result of your craving, as a result of your tanha. So anything we do like that, a loan is a big deal, right? So it changes your life. Maybe you're attracted to a person, so you have romantic engagement, and then children are the result, for example. I mean, these kinds of things are bhava, complex conglomerates of bhava over time. Once you have children, it's a whole new ballgame. Your life changes, so bhava. But the big one, bhava, really refers to rebirth or birth. As a result of kamma, then when you die at the moment of death, you grasp onto something that leads to rebirth, leads to patisandhi, leads to a new life. And that's bhava.
Ante, here's the next question. If one is totally disillusioned with worldly life, how does noting depressed help to see the uselessness of this defilement? Depression proliferates in my current conditions.
You're probably trying to make it go away. You think if I note depressed, the depression will go away. And that's just a common issue with the meditators face. They don't understand why it's not working. But mindfulness isn't to make things go away. It's to help you see them more clearly. What you're seeing as a result of mindfulness, what you don't realize, is that the depression is not you, it's not yours, it's not under your control. So if you persist in noting depression, even though it doesn't fix your problem, it will fix your problem, the real problem, which is the idea that this is, I'm depressed. When you say totally disillusioned, it's not actually true. You're depressed, but you're not disillusioned. Disillusioned is something else entirely. You don't like. Depression is at its root just disliking. And disliking isn't disillusionment. Disliking is aversion, and it's based on the fact that you want something different. But disillusioned is free from aversion, free from depression. You have to separate them, because there might be some sense of disillusionment that is mixed with disliking. But they're two very different things. Note the disliking as disliking. I think depressed is probably not the greatest one, because depressed is kind of a narrative. I am depressed. Right? Depressed isn't an experience. Depressed is a state of a person. It's okay, but it's not the best. Much better and clearer is to just say disliking. Call it what it is. Simple. And note the disliking whenever it comes up. Not trying to make it go away, trying to see that even this disliking is not me. It's not I'm depressed. It's not I'm disliking. Just a uncontrollable habit that has been cultivated and fed into becoming a monster. If it wasn't clear, once you see that things are not me, not mine, not under my control, when you see it as just something impersonal, like, look, it's coming up by itself, it's coming kind of arbitrarily, then you lose the attachment to it. Then the tanha disappears, the upadana disappears, the bhava disappears. You stop feeding it. And it does fade away by itself. Your whole life changes, really. It's deeper than just getting rid of depression. The way you look at everything changes. You look at things independently. You dwell independent. Anisito viharati. So no matter what happens, you're not fazed, you're not upset. Life can go on or stop. Neither one disturbs you.
Bhante, here's the next question. During a sitting meditation, I think I had an experience of impermanence as an image. It was a fearful experience, and I thought where the me is and what will happen to me. I realized intellectually that the questions were silly, but the feeling of terror still remains. I could be completely wrong about my interpretation. Do you have suggestions? I don't know if it is a normal experience to feel this kind of terror.
There's no such thing as normal. Normal, in fact, is kind of antithetical to the goal of the practice. The goal is to see that life is unreliable. No, it's not. You cannot rely on your expectations. Unpredictable. So normal doesn't have any meaning. Fear is based on disliking, so it's not a good thing. But it's again just a habit. It's a habitual reaction to certain experiences. So it's to be noted like anything else. Again, not trying to make it go away, just to see it clearly. It will go away by itself. Just say afraid, afraid. But you shouldn't ascribe meaning to things. You shouldn't say that was impermanence, or that was this, or that was that. That belies a sense of desire. You want to find impermanence, or you're hoping it's, oh, maybe I saw something good, or you like it because you think it's what you're supposed to be seeing, or something like that. All of that is what you should be noting, rather than trying to interpret things as being this or being that. You should note them as they are, and any reactions you have to them. That's how you'll truly see impermanence. It's not some mysterious or strange thing, impermanence is everywhere. It's just we don't pay attention, that's all. Usually you're overlooking when in terms of impermanent suffering and non-self, it's usually just that we're overlooking them. Not that there's some tiger deep in the jungle that you have to seek out. Permanence is everywhere. Suffering is everywhere. Non-self is everywhere. They're the characteristics. They're called the samanya lakkhana. Means they're the characteristics of everything that arises. And all it really means is that they're not what we think they are. They're not stable. They're not satisfying. They're not controllable. They're not made up of, or they're not part of something that is stable, satisfying, or controllable. There's no bigger thing than these impermanent suffering and non-self experiences. The building blocks are the reality. Pretty simple. It's not easy to see. That's because we're just so blind and so deluded and so mired in the hindrances. The hindrances, they're called hindrances because they're what stop us from seeing clearly. It's just when they're cleansed, then you see clearly.
Bhante, we have one more question left in Tier 1, and it will be the last question that we have for our session as well. One of the characteristics is we do not have control, but I seem able to control my breath, thoughts, and attention most of the time. How should I understand this?
When you say I control, you're talking about the mind, and the mind is also in permanent suffering and non-self. So if you pay better attention to the mind that wants things to happen a certain way and makes intentions to control, you'll get a better grasp on that. This is what happens when you intellectualize. What you're doing is intellectualizing, and I'm not really criticizing, I'm just pointing out that this is how how intellectualizing works. You analyze your experience, and you try to understand non-self in that way. It's much simpler than that. It's just that the physical and the mental aspects of reality arise and cease, and there's no self or soul behind them. There's just moments of experience, mental and physical. And those moments interact. The fact that they interact is an important thing to see. The fact that you can see that the mind wants something to happen, and then the physical thing happens. Or sometimes the physical thing happens, and as a result, there's a mental reaction or a mental observation, mental processing of the physical. Physical and mental absolutely work together. You don't stand up unless you want to stand up. But what is it that wants to stand up? Well, there's the wanting. And that wanting is also something that arises and ceases. That wanting is not self, because it's just a moment of experience. That's all it is. It's not anything bigger. It's not part of something bigger. Not I who wants. It's just wanting arises. As a result of wanting, then there's the physical response of standing up. The point is that that's all there is. Not I control my breath. I want my breath to be a certain way, and then it is a certain way. If you could control it, then you would just, then I could ask you, can you just make it rise and never fall? Or just rise and rise and rise forever? If you're really in control. Rise and keep rising until your stomach gets the size of a balloon. You can't, because you're not in control. No, what's real is that there's physical and mental components that arise and cease moment after moment, working together.
Thank you, Bhante. That's all the time that we have for today. As always, big thanks to you for all your wisdom and insight and your time. Thank you, Bhante.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the organizers and for people asking the questions, the readers, the people doing the reading. Very much appreciated that you take the time and you give us this gift of speaking the Dhamma. I hope no one's really discouraged or turned off by the fact that we go very slowly through this text. I do appreciate that I do most of the talking, and personally I appreciate a lot when other people do some of the talking, not because I mind talking, obviously, but because it's always encouraging when other people are engaged, So those people who ask questions in our Discord group and who have comments in the Discord group, I appreciate that very much. That's a sign of engagement, sign of interest. Obviously, those people who ask questions on YouTube, I appreciate that you take the time to ask those questions. And this is where it's at, Imagine, look at where we are. You see this? We're in a group of people who are seeking out such incredibly important truths. So these questions are what it takes to get to this point where these questions are being asked is quite remarkable. And so the questions are quite remarkable. And so I appreciate that people are actually here asking these questions. Much appreciation for the practice, for any and all of us, all of you who actually took this time to cultivate mindfulness, not just here intellectually to learn something, but actually took the time to use this as a exercise in mindfulness. Even if you just sat there and said hearing, that would be an incredible use of your time and a great use of this session as a means of keeping you on track and reminding you to stay mindful of the present moment. And if you weren't mindful at all during this, if you never engaged in mindfulness at all during the session, well, it's not too late as we come to the end. Appreciate the dedication and the support for the Buddha Sasana that goes into, or that comes out of these sessions. And appreciate the goodness and the benefit that it brings to all of you. So through the power of all the goodness that has been performed on this occasion, all the goodness that has been performed in this life and in past lives. Through the power of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, may you all be protected from pain and suffering and danger and sickness and calamity, enmity, disease. May you all live long, healthy, happy lives with the strength to face whatever challenges come your way. May you be mindful at the moment of death and in future lives go on to happy places, places where you can again engage with the Buddha's teaching and benefit from these priceless teachings. May your minds always be fixed and focused on the path to finding the truth through sila, samadhi, and panya. And through the practice, through the dedication, through the application to the Buddha's teaching. May you all find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering through the path, fruition, and nibbana. Sadhu.
Sadhu,
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 sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.